a transit ticket to come to the meeting, please see staff for a ticket. Hearing assisted devices are available from MAG staff. Katie, please take a roll call. Members of the board, we have some new faces, so please share that you are here, your organization name, and how long you've been on the board after Katie calls your name.
Thank you, Co-Chair Phillips. Tish Brown Gambino.
Present, Letitia Brown Gambino, Tish, and I'm from the Human Services Campus.
Thank you. And Tish is brand new to the board. Welcome. Jessica Cruz.
Hi, good afternoon. Can you guys hear me okay?
Yes, we can.
Awesome. Jessica Cruz, Native American Connections, and I've been on the board about 6 months.
Thank you. Liz DaCosta.
Hello, Liz DaCosta, Housing Program Administrator with Access.
Liz, how long have you been on the board?
This time around, I think maybe 2 months. I was on the board prior though. I'm a repeat offender.
Thank you. Lisa Glow. Lisa, you're on mute.
Okay. Thank you. Lisa Glow with Central Arizona Shelter Services. I believe I'm in my 2nd year on the board.
Thank you. Chris Hallett.
Yes, Chris Hallett, City of Peoria. I believe I'm in my 3rd year on the board. Nobody's kicked me off yet. So,
Michael Hughes.
Michael Hughes, a new leaf, and I'm in my 1st year.
Okay. Natalie Lewis.
Hi everyone, Natalie Lewis. I'm with the City of Mesa, and I think I'm just about finishing up our 1st year too.
Jessica Raymond. Name, organization, and how long you've been on the board.
Hi there, Jessica Raymond, Atlantic Development and Investment and Suffolk Property Management, and I've been on the board about a month.
Thank you. TJ Reed.
Hi y'all, TJ Reed, Maricopa County. This is my 1st meeting.
Welcome. Charles Sullivan.
Hi, Charles Sullivan with ABC Housing, and I lost count. I don't know. 4 years maybe?
5 years, I think. Close to it.
Yeah.
Deanna Valdez. Cricket Weatherington.
Cricket Weatherington, Arizona Housing Inc., and I've been on the board about 6 months.
Thank you. Danielle Wright.
Hi, Danielle Wright, Arizona Coalition to End Sexual and Domestic Violence. I think it's been almost 2 years. Is that right, Katie?
Sounds about right.
Okay, yeah.
Co-Chair Rachel Milne. Here, and Co-Chair Vicki Phillips.
Vicki Phillips, Community Bridges, and I think I'm close to about a year.
That sounds right also. With that, you have a quorum.
Perfect. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a call to the audience. This is an opportunity for the public to comment on items that fall under the Continuum of Care Board that are not on the agenda or that are on the agenda for discussion and not for action. 15 minutes will be provided for the call to the audience agenda item unless the committee requests an exception to this limit. Katie, were there any comments received or anyone who wishes to offer comments at this time?
There were no comments received and no one in the audience to offer comments today.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to the next agenda item. Our next item up is approval for the consent agenda, items 3A through 3D. They're on the agenda for consent. Does any member of the board have any questions, comments, or request a presentation on any of these items?
I have a question about item 3B, the shelter, the Bill of Rights. A few questions.
Go ahead, Natalie.
Okay. First of all, I want to say thank you to our committee, the lived experience committee, for putting this together. It's very well done. But the questions that I had were a little bit more geared toward, could you tell me a little bit about why we did this and what problem we were trying to solve exactly? And then I have other questions too, but can we start with that?
Of course. This is Haley Owens. And Tish, also, I know you were part of this, so feel free to jump in. From my understanding, there was a real desire to have just continuity of services. So any shelter that you go into, you just know that you can expect the same thing. So whether that's going to CAS or UMOM or wherever, you would know that you have the same set of rights everywhere you go. And while service delivery may look a little bit different, it was important to share that you will have the same basic rights everywhere. So I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So did our lived experience people then just say that all of these, shelters, there's an inconsistency with the service or their experiences? Is that what brought this up?
So this came up before I had taken over the lived experience committee. But from my understanding, that is the case. But Tish, definitely correct me if I'm wrong, if you are still on.
Do we lose Tish?
There she is.
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
I was just curious if the lived experience committee, the people who have had lived experience, did this come up because they specifically saw inconsistencies in how different shelters were, operating, and
yes,
they provided? Is that where this all came from?
Absolutely. Inconsistencies in operations, inconsistency in standards, and inconsistency in staff training. That some staff were more aware of the policies and procedures of the shelter operations under specific agencies than others. So this sort of put all the shelters on a level playing field. So when the participant walks into the shelter, they understand what the expectations are, and also the staff members understand what the expectations are of their service delivery.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, and I know we had a lot of really good people that were on this particular committee to put this together. But were there any service providers themselves that were on this? I mean, aside from the Human Service Campus, were there others that were involved in this conversation? And specifically, one of my colleagues wanted to know, for example, the iHelp and, the faith-based agencies and the work that they're doing.
I'm not aware of any faith-based agencies being involved in the conversation, but there were folks around the table that worked for shelter providers or worked for ESG funded providers. And we also had a sort of a discussion with ESG providers and ESG as a funder through MAG. So we were all on the same page when it came to the standard shelter bill of rights.
Yes, and I would love to add on to that. This is Haley again. We did invite a large swath of funders, and those who were available to attend did attend a session with part of our lived experience committee, and then as many funders as could show up. So that's where you see the difference between the client language versus the contract language, where it's a little more specific and references like requiring to have a policy rather than stating what the policy should be, because we understand that every shelter in that way is going to be a little bit different, but wanted to make sure that there is a standard of like, you have to have a policy around like weapon storage, for example, just things like that.
Okay. And then is this meant to be a guidance type of a document that just provides clarity across the board, or is there going to be like an enforcement expectation for it? And then it could be responsible for that.
That is a great question.
Yes. So the reason that we brought funders into the conversation is we do want it to be an enforceable document. The folks that were that attended the conversation that we had did feel comfortable moving forward with it as an enforceable document because on the contract side, it was a lot more flexible, especially around just stating that they would need to have policies in place rather, again, than stating what the policy should be. So while we know there's best practices, we know that's not really practical for every single shelter. So we just want to make sure that they are aware that they should have a policy around something, and then providing that to a client if it is asked for.
Okay. And then how are our clients going to know that this exists and these are their rights, and, and how to ask questions or submit a complaint if they're, if they have them?
Yeah. So we are, with the lived experience committee, we have worked on like a distribution strategy. It's going to be our expectation that This shelter bill of rights is posted publicly in all of the shelters with the client focused version, which has a little bit more simplified language. The longer version can be available upon request. And then for what was the second half of your question? I'm so sorry.
Just, I guess it's like, I feel like we need a little bit more clarity about, what the complaint process would be and how we're going to handle it and who is in charge of that.
Yeah, thank you. So sorry. The pregnancy brain is real. Yes. So all of our shelters should have a grievance policy in place. That's just something that should be standard. But MAG also has a grievance policy. If the client feels like something should be escalated, they can always contact us. We have a form online. And then if we receive those policies, if we receive a grievance form, we will definitely follow up with you all and let you know. So we can sort of resolve it together. We do ask that they submit a grievance policy through the shelter directly first. So if you haven't received something, we will probably refer them back before accepting it through MAG, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. So are we going to be asking our local government partners to include this kind of language in their agreements with shelter providers?
This is Katie. The hope is that within contracts, you're referencing back to this. So a lot of our ESG contracts up to this point have referenced back to like the program performance managers, the ESG written standards. So this would be another document that is referenced back that you are in alignment with the Shelter Bill of Rights, which is a COC document.
And it's only for ESG funding? It's not for any other federal funding then?
The hope is that this is across the board, but I was using that as an example of how they currently reference back to our documents for ESG.
Okay. I love this idea. I love that we had a really good, solid group of people that put this together. And I think it definitely isn't something that's going to hurt. It's going to be good. It's a good tool for people who are going through our system and all of those things. I do feel a little nervous about adopting something where there's still, I feel, just not a whole lot of clarity about how we're going to implement it and how we're going to enforce it, and just getting the word out to a broader swath of people and that are going to have to follow the rules. I do feel a little bit hesitant to vote on it right now, and I'm wondering if any of my colleagues on the board feel the same way. I think what would be great is if the lived experience committee could put their thoughts and pen to paper about these types of questions and then come back to the board and present it to us, so that we could see the whole thing before we just vote on parts.
Hey, this is TJ with Maricopa County. I'm just curious, maybe to answer some of that though, is could you talk through what committees and others have reviewed and voted on this? Because I know that y'all have done so much work already up to this point in trying to solicit feedback from all of the key stakeholders, whether it's clients, people with lived experience, shelter providers, or funders. And I know that it even went to ESG this last week. And so I agree with Natalie, but I think there's also, since it has gone through so many iterations and so many people for feedback, can you just talk through all of the things maybe, or at least a little bit more of how many kind of brains have reviewed and gone through this? Because I know I saw it a couple of months ago in 2 of the committees, and then I was out sick on Wednesday, but I believe it was at the ESG committee as well. So yeah, could you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So I inherited this project like halfway through. So Tisha, maybe relying on you too for this. But I know it came out of the lived experience committee. It was based on a Shelter Bill of Rights version that is in Minnesota. So we sort of took that framework and then adapted it to what would be most appropriate for Maricopa County. We did take it to ESG many months ago to get their feedback on it, to see, have that conversation about like what's practical, what's not, because it is important that it's enforceable, but we wanted it to not be burdensome. So it's like, how can we like sort of thread the needle between those two things? So we, based on the feedback from ESG and then what lived experience was comfortable with, we came up with a new package. And at that point, that's when we invited funders to sort of look at like, this is what we've come up with based on the feedback that we received from ESG. So what should be changed now? And I know we had Salvation Army for sure was there. Laura Skotnicki had a lot of really good feedback about like, yeah, these all sound great, but like not always practical. So we were able to make a few edits based off of the funder feedback in addition to ESG. And then, yes, you're right. It did go back to ESG this past week. And there were some slight pieces of feedback, but nothing that we felt was so would change the document super significantly. So that is why we decided to move forward with the board today. Tish, do you have anything to add?
I just want to add that we did present it to the Lived Experience Advisory Council through the ASU Action Nexus as well to get just more lenses around it from different folks with lived experience as well.
Okay. And then
can I
yeah.
also add, at one point in there was also a meeting with shelters funders and lived experience representatives. So all three came together to give feedback of like, this isn't practical from a shelter lens, but this is what the funder is asking for, but this is what we want as lived experience, that really made it shape into the document that it is today.
Okay. And then with that though, so if I heard you correct in terms of Natalie's, the request is that, or how accountability would happen is that funders would be requested to adopt some sort of language, either referencing this or putting the language from this into their contracts. And that's where accountability would be, not necessarily some like overarching accountability outside of contractual language.
Correct. Yeah. So what we tried to do was match as closely as possible what is already in contracts. So it's not like there has to be a huge revamp. Okay. So in a lot of cases, we already saw that contracts required policies around cleanliness and safety and things like that. So we were just aligning those and making it publicly available. I don't know the details of everybody's contract, so I don't know who will have to change what. But yeah, we tried to make it as seamless as possible without putting too much burden on any one group.
But then that's the accountability, is that it would come from the contract, but it's just a request to funders. So a funder could say, no, I don't want to do that. And there's no accountability there. It's just on those that would accept it. Is that right?
Yes, theoretically, yes. We really hope that everybody would, but totally understand that, yes, it is ultimately their choice.
Okay.
So Madam Chair, yeah, just I support what Natalie was saying, because you're asking us to adopt it. And so by our adoption, what does that really do? If it's just an adoption of this shelter bill of rights, nobody has to do anything. But you talked about distribution, posting, and some of those things. And I would ask if you guys talked about adding one that it's a right to grieve, to file a grievance. And because that's the connectivity. If you put that on there, yeah, they have a right to file a grievance, and you hold that individual shelter provider accountable with their contact information. And then I do wonder, yeah, your contractual one, they don't know who the funders are. And if we're adopting it, wouldn't we be a centralized point of contact as well? Just even if it's referring it back. So I think I'm with Natalie. I know a lot of work's been put into it, but now it's here where we have the kind of the final questions, and it's just out of context, but in and of itself, it's a great document, but how is it interconnected to assure these rights are established and supported at each shelter?
Yes, and we do think and welcome your questions very much, because that's how we make it better. So that's why we bring it to you. And I do appreciate all of your guys' feedback. And we, if we're not comfortable voting on it today, we'd be happy to take it back to the Lived Experience Committee and answer some of those questions, and then maybe have a representative from LEC come back and address those for you.
So what would, this is Michael Hughes. Haley, what would be the next steps then?
I would say if today you guys choose not to vote on this, to pull it off and table it for, I don't know if your next meeting is too busy, but we will find a meeting in the next couple months. And I will help prep Lived Experience Committee with your questions. And hopefully they'll have some time at a future meeting to come present. And then at that point, if you feel like all your questions have been answered and resolved, you could choose theoretically to vote at that point.
Yeah.
I think important to
Oh, I'm sorry, go ahead. I see some of my other colleagues have something to say, but I wanted to say one last thing before we end the conversation.
I just want to say in no way, shape or form should the committee interpret this as it's not what we, you know, we're not unhappy. I think it's more with questions being raised. Then let's just make sure the procedure moves the best way.
Absolutely. A bunch of heads are better than just a few.
Yeah, and I don't know about Natalie, but I'm happy to find out when lived experience is meeting and participate at that level. So if we have direct questions, might as well be there available for them as well.
Sure.
Yeah, I can definitely follow up with you all after the meeting for that.
Yeah, and it sounds like there are just a couple, even just very specific questions and it seems less about content and more about implementation on both sides. And so maybe that can, if this group could even provide clarity of those questions prior of like, if we need to get together and clarify what those like implementation questions are so that it's easier for them to answer. That'd be great.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it's okay with the board. And Katie, I would love to reach out to you all just to maybe get a list of questions, just to make sure that we're answering everything really thoroughly. And then we can sort of coordinate whether that's you all coming to lived experience or us coming to you. We can sort of work out those details.
Liz, I believe you had your hand up patiently waiting.
Yeah, sorry. Thank you so much. So yeah, I do have some content comments. So the first is, since it's going back for number 6, we're talking about trained, compassionate, and diverse staff. I wonder if they could try to expand upon policies that will help us ensure that there's more compassionate and diverse staff. We kind of touched on training, but maybe think through a little bit more there. And then the other one is 9. So organizations should only involve police as necessary and follow the Maricopa Regional COC release of information when discussing law enforcement. This seems to be the one that instead of requiring that each agency have their own separate policy, we're a little bit more descriptive. And I do suggest we take it back to them ensuring they have their own policy, because if we're talking about, you know, a shelter provider sometimes may need to involve law enforcement. And in order to do that, they would need to have the HMIS release of information signed. That's not how some organizations manage their HIPAA requirements. And so we should probably leave it up to them to be able to implement according to their own agency policies. The other thing on that is if they do sign the HMIS ROI, if that's what you all are referencing in there, then wouldn't that law enforcement agency have access to HMIS? And I don't think we're trying to go there. So just 6 and 9 for review.
Great, thank you.
And thank you for your work on that.
Thanks.
Cricket?
So I think my perspective on this is a little bit different. And I agree with all the questions for sure. Because the COC can govern certain things, and like the little COC and the big COC, I think there's 2 purposes of this. The first is to say that we believe that people who are in shelter have certain rights. The enforcement is a separate issue to me. So, because there's lots of places we won't ever be able to enforce this. We're not like the enforcers of all things across all universes, right? And so for us I'm just saying for us to keep those 2 tracks are, to me, they're different. So if I have a shelter and I'm running it out of my church, for instance, and I'm not getting any COC funding or any funding from a municipality who's putting this in a contract, we still think they should be doing these things. So I don't know. I mean, I think that's what we feel like. There's a monitoring enforcement component, but there's also just the side of this about the aspirational, this is what we believe people should have. And so I think we just keep that in mind as we move forward, that they are not, we don't actually have the jurisdiction to be the enforcer of all things. We hope, as Haley said, that people will bring this on, but if they don't, it doesn't mean that we shouldn't say they should, or we shouldn't tell people, you know, we believe you have the rights to these things in your shelters. Does that make sense, what I'm saying?
Kind of, yeah.
Yeah, I think Cricket, this is Katie. Ultimately, at the end of the day, like COC does not fund any shelter. That's not
Right,
something
that's,
that's eligible to fund. So ultimately, a lot of the things that you adopt is in partnership with other folks in this space because cities are funding shelters or other folks are. And so in the same way that we oversee best practices across a lot of things that the COC doesn't fund. And so those are all going to be coming to you all soon. And so it is really in partnership with other folks. And the COC will never fund a lot of those activities.
right. So I'm just saying that we, as we're thinking about, I mean, rollout and implementation is one thing, but we also have to be aware that we have a committee of this COC that's saying this, the Live Experience Committee saying this is important and we need this. And so we need to figure out how to make it, I just think there are two different things. Is there a Bill of Rights? And then what do we do with it? So as maybe when it comes back, we can look at it from that frame of, do we agree with this Bill of Rights? Okay, then where is it implementable? Does everybody feel like the questions have been answered? And again, this is not to say I don't agree with the questions. I just am really clear that it's a bifurcated thing in my mind. Thank you.
Thank you, Cricket. Natalie, I believe you had a comment.
Yeah, I don't have any issue with the form at the end of the day, whether it's one document or two documents. But I think because our committee has basically said this is a problem, we have an inconsistency out there for how our shelters are respecting people or providing service. And so it's so important that we want to put together a shelter bill of rights. And so what I really want to make sure that Trish, that you're taking back to the committee is, I really appreciate this. And I tend to agree with where you guys are coming from. In my world in local government, we can't just like create a new law or a new code or a policy without knowing that, number one, all the people involved or who are going to be impacted by it have weighed in. But number two, how is it going to be implemented? And so if we don't have that second part, then then we are just purely aspirational and it's a little bit more voluntary and we're not meeting what the committee really wanted us to do to begin with. And so I like the idea of coming back and whether we go to you or you come to us, I think this is a great document. I just want it to be intentional and something that's used. So that would be my thought at the end. And I just, like everyone else, we want the committee to know we really appreciate the work and them weighing in on this because this is the kind of stuff we need to know about.
Well, thank you, Natalie, for that. And it's Tish, by the way. That's okay. But I can bring that back to the group. And I think it would benefit those with questions to attend the next meeting, the next LEAC meeting, if you can. If you can. I think it will be helpful to the group and helpful to you all to understand some of the background and the context, and also to discuss implementation and what our expectations are. I mean, aspirational, absolutely, but we also want to ensure that folks are accountable.
Lisa, I believe you had a comment and then we'll move on.
Sure. I'll be really brief. I think it's an awesome document and that this is a good direction. I appreciate this conversation. I echo some of the conversations from others in terms of implementation, or some of it seems like really aspiring for best practices. And then how would it be used, by a client? What does that mean in terms of actual operations? But I'm glad we're going in this direction. One thing I don't know if it mentions or not is trauma-informed care. It might be in there, but that's an aspiration, I think, that we want to be delivering. I mean, it's probably assumed within this. So it's just some of the language and how I'm thinking with the idea also of if we are expected to this and we don't do it, what does that mean? The client has a right to sue us, or what is the rights? It's just the practical stuff. But I absolutely love it. Think it's great, and just think I appreciate that we have a little more time to work through it.
Thank you, Lisa.
Vicky, can I make a comment? I think that Lisa makes a good point, because I look at this and I do feel it's very aspirational. And so I sit and I look at, for instance, number 2, and I say to myself, organizations are required to provide adequate space for resources offered. And so I candidly speaking, how does that get decided? And so, for instance, do I wish in our facilities that we had more space? Yes. Do we need more space? Yes. Do we have more space? No. And so I struggle a little bit with, well, what is the affirmation piece versus a Bill of Rights where we're not following through then with what the quote Bill of Rights. And so I'm not trying to be picky, but I do sense that we need to be somewhat careful on the aspirational piece versus the expected piece.
Thank you, Mike.
And everybody's afraid to say that, but it's something that we all struggle with, we all have to deal with. And there's things that we can provide, and there's things that we can't. So I don't want to get caught up in, okay, you didn't, now you're violating the Bill of Rights. And I don't know how that gets interpreted. I hope I'm making sense.
Thank you, Mike.
No, you are making sense. Understood.
All right. Thank you for the dialogue around the Shelter Bill of Rights. Does any member of the public wish to comment on any items on the consent agenda? So based on the feedback and the dialogue today, I'd like to have a motion to pull item 3B and approve consent items 3A, 3C, and 3D.
That's Chris, so moved.
Chris, may I have a second?
I second.
Thank you,
Michael
Mike.
Hughes.
Is there discussion of the motion from the board or comments from the public? Okay, for those in the room, we will take a voice vote. Those in favor, please say yay.
Yay.
Okay.
Those opposed, please say nay. Katie, will you proceed with the roll call for those online?
Tish Brown Gambino,
Yay.
Jessica Cruz,
Yay.
Liz DaCosta,
Yay.
Lisa Glow, Natalie Lewis.
Yay.
Thank you. Jessica Raymond,
Yay.
TJ Reed. No, never mind. Charles Sullivan.
Yeah.
Thank you. Cricket Weatherington,
Yay.
Danielle Wright.
Yeah.
Lisa, are you back? All right, the motion passes unanimously.
All right, thank you. We'll move on to our next agenda item. Okay, the next item on the agenda is a coordinated entry overview. I will turn it over to Amy Schwabenlander with the Human Services Campus and Mila Baye with UMOM New Day Centers. Welcome, Amy and Mila.
Cricket, did you?
Thank you so much. I don't know if Amy's talking or not, but thank you so much for having us here and giving us the opportunity to present on coordinated entry. Anna Gum will be presenting on the Family Housing Hub, its process, and then I will be talking about the funding request for the expansion. So I'm going to turn it over to Anna.
Hi, everyone. Thanks for having us. Again, I'm Anna Gama, Family Housing Hub Manager with UMOM. So I'm going to share a bit of our background. UMOM's Family Housing Hub is the lead family coordinated entry agency since 2014. As a lead agency, the Family Housing Hub team is responsible for diversion, assessment, and shelter placement services, as well as shelter and housing match referrals. In addition, we onboard new shelter and housing partners, family entry points, and are also responsible for ongoing data compliance and training. We facilitate bi-monthly case conference meetings to address progressive engagement and also to support our partners with specific client connection needs that they may have. We currently are partnered with 14 agencies that provide a variety of programs such as family shelter, rapid rehousing, transitional housing, permanent supportive housing, a project-based voucher, and entry points. The Family Housing Hub will also be participating in the Move On strategy project that's upcoming. Our team consists of 1 manager, 3 specialists, and 1 housing match specialist. Currently in our community, there are a few family entry point locations. The Family Housing Hub is the main location that is now providing phone services in partnership with 211. 211 is available to speak to families 24/7. For in-person services, we have CAS, NREC out in Glendale, and a New Leaf West Valley Housing Assistance Center in Surprise. Also for families that are in Avondale, there is a New Leaf staff member that works with the City of Avondale's outreach team. And in Tempe, we're working with the Hope outreach team as they encounter families out in that city. This last fiscal year, as you see on the screen, we served just over 2,000 families. If you're interested more in more specific data, MAG has already launched a coordinated entry dashboard that has a lot more details and data. I also wanted to share a bit more of a summary of how families get connected to coordinated entry services. So families with kids in their care or adults or families in their 3rd trimester of pregnancy experiencing homelessness in the county can directly call 211, or if they're in Glendale or in Surprise, they can visit the in-person locations. The outreach teams serve families as they encounter them during their outreach. If the family calls 211, just like at the in-person entry points, 211 is able to provide diversion and shelter screening services and place eligible families on the shelter wait list. The Family Housing Hub staff then follows up with the family and completes the assessment portion of the screening. With this new process, we've seen that families have more accessibility when they are seeking services. Our current wait list for shelter is 9 weeks at this point.
So one of the things that was asked is about the expansion that we requested funding for. So the expansion will allow us the opportunity to have offsite office hours in the East and West Valley. This will allow us to have more physical presence and accessibility to families who are at risk of experiencing homelessness in those regions. This will also allow families to get connected to resources, supports, and access to homeless services. With our request, it'll actually be supporting the 4 current specialists that we have, and they will dedicate a portion of their time to those projects. That is the end for us. Does anyone have any questions on coordinated entry for families?
I do have a question. Anna, you mentioned accessibility. How are you evaluating accessibility?
Yeah, right now, so we're at the end of the month, and we've seen an increase on the shelter waitlist numbers from previous months.
Just an example, Tish, last month we had about 135 families waiting on the service priority list. Just today, we have over 300 families waiting on the service priority list.
And you believe that is from your collaboration with 211?
Yeah, we've actually had reports from families who said that they are able to call 211 at midnight, where the Family Housing Hub was only open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5. And now families can call at any time when they're experiencing any crisis or anything like that and be able to get connected.
And does 211 also have the ability to work with folks that have English as a second language or are monolingual and have other barriers?
Yeah, so yeah, all the entry points, including 211, have interpreter services.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
This is TJ from the county. It sounds like the expansion efforts are to increase access. And it sounds like the other thing that you've been doing with 211 is increasing access, and that is adding more and more families to the list. So can you talk through maybe the balance of increasing access with some of the other required services like diversion, and what you would see as something that's helpful, obviously outside of just increasing the amount of housing that's available to people, to see a reduction in the service priority list while you're doing these efforts to increase access?
Anna, do you want to answer that?
Yeah, I think something I can share is that although, we've shared that 211 has increased access and, at a glance, it seems to be beneficial to the families. That's what the feedback that we've been seeing in numbers and then hearing directly from families, that the sort of increasing access to the East Valley would be so that there could be in-person availability, which has been mentioned to us by community partners as well, questioning about when families don't have a reliable phone or a working phone. And so that would be part of it. Having more staff too gives us more capacity to spend more time on diversion as well. We do that with our partnership with 211. We're actually having those opportunities when families speak to 211, they do have a diversion conversation. When we follow up with them from the Family Housing Hub, we attempt diversion one more time. And so having those in person, or having more staff to have those in person interactions, will also give us that leverage to be able to have those conversations in person and not just over the phone.
Awesome. Thank you. And one last question for y'all on that. Have you seen a noticeable dip in your diversion rate by shifting to telephonic conversations, both with 211 and yourselves, versus having them in person?
It doesn't seem like that. I think when we have seen like lower rates has been more due to lack of resources in the community, not enough move-in funds, or not enough eviction prevention, or people not being able to access that. So we haven't seen anything that reflects from the 211. That's a good question though, because over the last 3 years, I would say we got a lot of practice due to the pandemic in doing those phone services. I know a lot of you know, I don't know that everybody does, that during the pandemic, the Family Housing Hub added phone services, but we never closed our doors for in person. But those adding that phone services helped us really figure out like how we can have meaningful conversations, have diversion over the phone. So we know it's doable. We were comfortable as we were moving in this direction, but data-wise, we haven't seen that reflected in that way. I would say more when we have lower rates, it's more because we don't have a lot of resources to really support some of the diversion plans that the families might have.
Awesome. Thanks, Anna.
Thanks.
Natalie, I believe you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. So first of all, thank you for your presentation and thank you for your time. Mila, I came to your campus not too long ago to take a look at it because the city of Mesa is purchasing a hotel, and that was really helpful, insightful, and you guys got a really good thing going on there. A 9-week waiting list concerns me. I mean, clearly we all have waiting lists in the programs that we have because we don't have enough services like Mike Hughes was talking about. But as you guys move forward, and you don't have to answer this question right now, but I'm assuming, do you have data that shows, okay, here's the average number of days that a family stays at our housing hub. This is, the cost per family that we're spending. This is the cost per participant. We know how much the cost per key or room is. Do you guys have that kind of a data so that you can help us advocate for you and use some of that information?
So for you, Mom, we do have that data, but we don't have that data for the other shelters that are involved in the coordinated entry. And part of that is once we start, looking at the data, like between phones and in person, we'll be able to see like the impact this is having on the community and what the real need is.
Okay. Yeah, I just would be really interested to know a little bit more about that, only because everything that I'm going through right now in purchasing a hotel, the community is, relentless and asking questions about this and how much it's costing. And I feel like for us to advocate to get more services with you all, we need to know that stuff.
Absolutely.
So
And actually, I can send that information to you directly.
that'd be fine. That'd be great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you, Mila. Amy?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the Continuum of Care Board. For the Human Services Campus, Inc., I'll go through the current contract with HUD and our request for the expansion. So our current work, our HUD contract is about $502,000 a year, plus 10% for admin. Similar to how Anna described the family process, individuals start with an intake and assessment. And then are placed into the process with the by name list, weekly case conferencing, ultimately, hopefully housing match for everyone to refer them to a vacancy in housing. We also have a diversion process at the front end. Last year, we had over 14,000 unique individuals just come to the Human Services campus alone. There are 40 other access points across the valley. And in total, we divert or do that one-time diversion for about 10% of the people. And diversion is a reunification with family, friends, or another support network. In the current HUD contract, that funds one manager, 2 people who are in the housing match team, and 6 positions that we call crisis intervention specialists, which are the people on first shift in the welcome center. In our expansion request, we requested an additional 283,000-ish plus admin 10% for a total of 324. With that funding, we would like to add positions. One, so that we can better support the 40 access point network for single adults, do deeper diversion work, ensuring that across Maricopa County, everyone is looking for those diversion opportunities. They're cost effective, they're quick. We prevent people from getting caught up and stuck in our homeless services system. And we learned a lot with the Maricopa County Flex Fund contract that allowed us to have a person dedicated to ensuring an equitable process, reviewing applications, reviewing expenses, and providing ongoing feedback. And we lack the capacity to be able to do that with the diversion process across the valley at this time. And the funding would also assist us with, what did I say? 7 crisis intake and assessment specialists and 1 housing navigation specialist with that additional funding. So an additional 8 positions. Currently, the Brian Garcia Welcome Center is open 24/7. In large part, thanks to ARPA money from the city of Phoenix that allows us to have staff on shift, 2nd and 3rd shift. This expansion contract through HUD would start January 1st, 2025, which will be post the ARPA fiscal cliff, of which I'm sure we all are suffering or will be suffering the consequences. As an example, why 2nd and 3rd shift is important beyond the Welcome Center being a place of refuge and safety at night. It's a place where we can refer people to empty shelter beds on the campus and across the valley. In 2023, the data for January through July, the 2nd and 3rd shift staff completed 2,956 individual intakes and placed 1,105 individuals in shelter. So as we had expanded our hours at the end of 2021, yes, we're approaching our 2-year anniversary of 24 hours. We've seen that as the word gets out and people know the Welcome Center is a place to go, is a place to be safe, our staff see more and more people. They also can do the diversion process and lots of other things in the 2nd and 3rd shift hours. the by name list for adults currently, so the people who have been assessed at any one of those access points and are awaiting a referral for rapid rehousing or permanent supportive housing, is 6,859. And what else did I want to tell you? I think that's all I wanted to share. The other, I have an ask for the board. I think given this conversation, the questions, and that there's always a want, a desire, a need to know more. And I would stress that the coordinated entry process is one of the 3 systems in a continuum alongside HMIS and the collaborative applicant. I would strongly ask that the board hear regular monthly updates from the coordinated entry subcommittee, because there's so much change underway. There's so much conversation going on around the tool and how coordinated entry is meant to be a system. I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you today. And I think that this is a system piece that when you look at the dashboard of inflow and outflow, it ties to coordinated entry. And as being a past COC board member, I think that it's imperative for the board to understand better the data points, the inflow, the outflow. What can our teams between HSC and UMOM be sharing with you to shed more light on what's happening and what's not happening, and where there are backlogs in our system? And I can't implore you enough. Any questions? And my colleague Tish has been waiting all day to ask me really difficult questions. Not now. She'll ask me later.
This is Chris. I have a question, Chair. Hi, it's probably predominantly with the individual coordinated entry, but what role, if any, is coordinated entry involved in the cleanup efforts around the campus? And 2, how are calls handled? It's a first come, first serve, because we're hearing from our providers that there's been some jurisdictions have been passed over for prioritizing the cleanup efforts.
I'm not sure what that piece means. So coordinated entry is coordinated entry. The Human Services Campus Inc. is required by City of Phoenix stipulation to have neighborhood cleanup done twice a day between 7th Avenue and 15th Avenue and the railroad tracks to Jefferson.
I'm talking about the court mandated cleanup, placement of all individuals.
That's a City of Phoenix project.
Right. So there's no correlation to coordinated entry for those individuals.
Rachel's not here today, is she? I don't see her name. I would suggest that the City of Phoenix present to the COC committee and board their process for finding indoor spaces for the 800 or so people that have been asked to move from the neighborhood. The city did another enhanced engagement this morning. The last one is this Wednesday on Jackson. What I can tell you in our experience as HSC and coordinated entry is that whenever I think it's, how do I want to say that? It's primarily funder driven, I would say, whether it's a jurisdiction or it's philanthropy, has an idea around money and a housing intervention and who to prioritize, and does not put it through the coordinated entry process. We create side doors, and it can lead to a different prioritization. That's not the COC approved prioritization. So HSC will be participating, as the City of Phoenix asks us to, in the process that they are developing with some private dollars that are being raised across the community for rapid rehousing. That, again, my understanding, I'm not part of it, my understanding is it's for rapid rehousing for people who are moving away from our neighborhood.
Amy, can you talk, sorry, this is Katie. Can you talk a little bit about coordinated entry's role in shelter on the single side, and how coordinated entry is really more focused on that housing intervention? I think that's some of this underlying conversation too in the room.
So here at the Human Services Campus, we can refer to shelter from the Welcome Center, which again is where coordinated entry can start with an intake and assessment. So we can refer to vacant beds at CAS, the still operating overflow shelter in the Lodestar Day Resource Center day room, St. Vincent de Paul's dining room, and the Respiro shelter. And we're part of the working group that MAG is supporting to develop the single adult referral shelter process similar to what the families use. Because we are open 24 hours a day, we can make that referral to shelter at any time if the data is updated and current in the spreadsheet to refer people. Katie, I don't know what you meant by the housing.
Yeah, I think maybe that was exactly what I was looking for.
Okay.
Really coordinated entry is really focused on housing referrals. And so the engagement around the Human Services Campus is really focused on getting people into shelter. And so we want to make sure that they're engaged through coordinated entry, but coordinated entry isn't the one directing into those shelter openings.
Correct. We're not directly referring, as the city has done its block by block activity. The city has asked shelter providers, do you have vacancies? So like leading up to today, the city of Phoenix emailed the shelter providers saying, hey, we're doing this activity on October 30th. Tell us what vacancies you have. And that includes CAS, Respiro, Overflow. They'll do the same thing, I would guess, tomorrow, Tuesday, for the last enhanced engagement activity that happens on Wednesday, saying how many shelter spaces do you have? So that shelter referral is not happening through coordinated entry or through Human Services Campus. The larger, broader discussion we are part of on shelter referral. And what I was hoping maybe I was explaining is, as the city is working on housing, long-term housing for the people displaced from the neighborhood, I think that is a place for funded housing interventions to be connected to coordinated entry. Otherwise, what happens, what we're seeing, and maybe what you were alluding to, is that because of courts and a judge's decision, our community now has a prioritization because a judge said between 7th Avenue and 15th Avenue, the railroad tracks in Jefferson, the whole areas after Wednesday will be posted for no camping. And this homelessness in this neighborhood is now a public nuisance. So it creates a priority that, again, is not COC approved, but it's put the pressure on the city of Phoenix that they will be in contempt of court if they do not uphold what the judge has now told them to do related to ending homelessness. So I would say, I think it's a great time for us as community and organizations to think about the longer term implications of this and come up with a process ourselves that avoids the creation of large several hundred encampments in Maricopa County. Or I fear that other neighborhoods will file lawsuits in any city across Maricopa County and expect the same response. And I don't think that that's why we're all here, is to leave it up to a court to tell us how to end homelessness. Thanks for letting me get on my soapbox.
Thank you, Amy. I believe, Natalie, you have a question?
Yeah, thank you, Tish and Amy. I tend to agree with you. I think if Phoenix is successful, we're all successful because they are the core of our area. So thank you for saying that. I appreciate your soapbox on that point. But I did want to know more about overflow shelters. I heard through my public outreach process, for example, that there is a hotel that HSC has purchased in Mesa, and I wasn't familiar with it. And so I wanted to find out where else you have it and where in Mesa that is in particular.
HSC has not purchased a hotel. When I talk about overflow shelter, it's using the spaces here at 12th Avenue in Madison in our day room and St. Vincent de Paul's dining room. That started in early 2020 in the pandemic, with Maricopa County funding that as, quote, COVID overflow shelter. We're still funded to continue that as long as the county and the city agree that we should have that. HSC is using ARPA money from the state on 2 properties in the valley for bridge housing, where people can stay as they move from temporary emergency shelter into permanent housing. So we have not purchased a hotel, do not plan to purchase a hotel.
Is one of those locations then in Mesa? Is that what I was hearing about?
There's a location in the Far East Valley that we are not publicizing the address.
Thank you. Any further questions? Any additional comments?
Amy, just one thing, this is TJ from the county. Can you clarify again? So the expansion is really for, it's one person or FTE that's going to be focused on sort of that like diversion and training and compliance of like all of your entry points. And then the rest, which I can't remember, was 6 or 7 for welcome center staff. Is that correct?
It's a total of 8, 7 crisis intake and assessment specialists, 1 housing navigation specialist, and it could be the housing navigation person that assists with the diversion strengthening. They would also help with case conferencing and meeting the needs as more money is put together for housing solutions to support case conferencing. So the ultimate assignment of who does the deeper diversion work could be any one of those positions or part of one of our current funded positions.
Okay, thank you.
Or pieces of multiple people.
Liz, I believe you had your hand up. Do you have a follow-up question?
Yeah, just a question. I know from participating in coordinated entry subcommittee, just all the work that you and your team does. So thank you. I just wonder about like business intelligence and data review. Can you tell me right now, where is that work being performed, Amy? I heard you talk about this partnership with the HMIS lead. So when we have trends that are occurring within the housing match system or even case conferencing, where does that like data analysis and business intelligence review occur?
I don't know that it does. I mean, none of us are staffed to do business intelligence, so I wouldn't even label it that. I don't know what I don't know what the outcome would be or what the expectation would be of that.
Yeah, we just have things come up often when we're looking at trends. I mean, when it comes to like folks who are being referred in different race and ethnic backgrounds, the performance of permanent supportive housing programs that we're referring to. So I think it's kind of an ask actually for MAG, if we could take that back and look at maybe examples of other coordinated entry systems that have data analytic capabilities and see if there's any opportunity for us to try to prioritize some funding towards things like that.
Liz, this is Katie. I think some of that is happening as you all approved in your September meeting. We did just have a coordinated entry dashboard go live that really tracks people's process through the system. It's filterable by family versus single, demographics, household composition, disability status, kind of all of the things that we looked at through the coordinated entry evaluation. I think on the second question, looking at analytics of how permanent supportive housing programs are performing and rapid rehousing programs are performing, we're looking at what does it look like to have a detailed dashboard based off of program performance, because as both Amy and Mila will tell you, as much as coordinated entry can control that, that is completely out of their control. And so really holding housing programs accountable to those metrics and those performance and being able to break it down by individual programs and also individual agencies and also individual programs. Sometimes we know if you have a really, really small program with only 5 households, one person can really skew that data, or one household can really skew that data. So we're looking at kind of both, and especially as agencies often run programs very similarly for the same population. So we're looking at that. I think that really is more on the COC side and less on the coordinated entry side when it gets to the housing program portion of it. But I think we have been recognized for the work we've been doing on the CE dashboard from that side because of how detailed it is. And that was really in partnership with the coordinated entry leads and our HMIS lead to be able to get that up and running. I will tell you, slight hiccup with the 2024 data standards. As those data standards are rolling out, we're having to revamp all of those dashboards. We anticipate having those up within the next month to be completely, with race and ethnicity combining, all of our dashboards identify those as two different fields, and now they're becoming one field. So working through the mapping on the back end of those still.
Yeah, it's excellent. And I give recognition to all the work done. Absolutely. I think there's some data that our coordinated entry leads will have direct access to in real time, that when we have some type of position that understands data analytics, they can foresee and try to interpret it in different ways. One example is coordinated entry, the permanent supported housing projects that they are referring to. You know, what percentage of those individuals are at the top of the by name list, or are there permanent supported housing projects that are accepting referrals from different areas that only coordinated entries would have access to? So what my ask is just that if we can look at the budgets for other coordinated entry leads to see, are there any positions in those budgets that are funded that we might want to look at within our system?
We can definitely look into that further. Liz, one other thing that we are launching in partnership with both of the leads is I'm going to butcher this, and Anna, I'm looking at you. It's a data quality report so that they can start to look through that HMIS will be producing on a monthly basis to really say, like, where does data quality need to be further enhanced, and where do we need to roll out training in response also to that data quality, to specifically for folks at the top of the biting list. Anna, did I capture that correctly?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Sounds great. It's excellent. Thank you.
Amy, I had one other question for you. So I'm curious if you all have thought about, because I'm assuming when you did the initial proposal, it might have been at various stages with the stuff going on downtown. So with the impact of people not being able to camp outside of the campus, do you anticipate there being a decrease in the amount of people that you see? And if there is there ability to flex some of the amount of staff that would be focused and targeted at the Welcome Center to be dispersed more regionally?
So I would say yes to the second part of your question. If able to, we could flex. And the city of Phoenix is launching a project called a Safe Outdoor Space on 15th Avenue in Harrison, which I don't want to speak for Rachel. Sometime soon, though, we'll have potentially 300 people camping adjacent to the campus. So I don't suspect that our numbers are going to drop dramatically. And I think this, if I looked at the system flow dashboard correctly, although it was quick, our inflow of people into homelessness is still far outpacing our exits into housing. So I don't think the number of people we see or serve is going to drop anytime soon. And TJ, if I put my optimistic hat on and it does drop, then yes, we flex 24 hours a day. We'll keep flexing to meet the regional demand.
Thanks, Amy. Yeah, and I don't anticipate that homelessness would go down by that in the region, just more of those in the downtown area where they're no longer legally allowed to camp.
They're not camping, they're sitting during the day, I can tell you. So thanks, TJ.
Thank you, Amy and Mila. All right, next up, Katie, I'm going to turn it over to you to provide an overview on the strategic plan. The floor is yours.
Thanks, Vicki. I'm going to quickly go through updates on the strategic plan. This gets brought to you quarterly in alignment with your strategic plan. You also can go look at this whenever you are interested. We have a landing page that has updates on the strategic plan. It has a one-pager like on the right side. It is completely updated. It has an overview of the work. You can download this one-pager and put it on your desk and look at it every day if you're interested. So over the last quarter, as far as regulatory roles and oversight, we added 18 new members across 4 different committees, including the board. Welcome new members once again. You all saw COC and ESG written standards and reviewed and approved those. You approved VAWA, so got those up and through. And then you also, at your last meeting, approved HMIS policies. Finally, we submitted the NOFO in September after you all approved it. This upcoming quarter, the committee is currently underway for recruitment. That just closed on Friday, and they will be electing new members in November. And then the coordinated entry committee will be opening for their recruitment in December. Our goal with recruitment is to only have one committee open at a time. So you'll see kind of a staggered recruitment throughout the course of the year. All of the committees have been working on strategic planning and are going to have a whole frame of work for you all to consider at your strategic planning on December 4th. And then finally, we're beginning point in time count planning, with that really launching in the next few weeks and then happening in January. Under your strategic or your system performance measures strategic plan, we have really moved forward the work of the coordinated entry evaluation work group on the assessment tool that was a recommendation from the CE committee and will be coming to you all next month, to the board as well as to the committee. We created 2 employment toolkits, one really focused on employers and one for future employees. And there is a training that launched within the COC Learning Gateway. We also launched the Move On Strategies training and sent that out to partners. If you are a service provider under the Rapid Rehousing or Permanent Supportive Housing programs and you would like your staff to take this, please go get them to take this training, and then they can start making referrals through the Move On process. And then finally, we held 4 provider feedback sessions on program interventions. Those have really moved forward work both in the ESG space, but also in rapid rehousing, working with funders really now on some next steps to try to understand how can we make programs work for both providers and for funders and really meet in the middle. We have so many activities upcoming in the system performance measures. Coordinated entry is continuing to work on the integration of domestic violence data, especially as we launch that new tool, continuing to improve the coordinated entry system. You've continued to hear from them as to the work that they are doing, but making sure that is streamlined and integrated. Data committee has been working on a baseline development for HMIS projects and to increase participation, working both with 2-on-1 folks and also programs that we know are not in HMIS, trying to get more folks into that system, into the HMIS system. We are in the process of finalizing a by name list training in the COC Learning Gateway that should be launched by the end of the month. And then continuing to improve data quality, specifically in fields, universal data element fields. We are working with HMIS to do a series of shorter videos that are 5 to 7 minutes long, really focused on those spaces where data quality needs to improve, and then be able to assign folks that training within the learning management system. The local jurisdiction committee is continuing to increase the number of rental units available, working in partnership with Threshold, but also jurisdiction partners. That expansion of employment opportunities and access to employment is really important, in working with additional businesses that are interested in hiring people with lived experience. And then finalizing the diversion and prevention toolkit. We have a solid draft that is in the process, but that will be finalized this quarter. Race Equity Committee, they are continuing to review their system performance measures and the provider performance measures, program performance measures, and are going to suggest policy changes to improve racial and ethnic disparities. They are also continuing to work on a workforce and leadership development work group to increase diversity and retention, specifically at the C-level suite for people of color. The committee is increasing connections to other systems of care. They have 2 different work groups going on, both on that rapid rehousing side, really making sure that people are staying in those rapid rehousing and being successful when they're connected with other systems. And then secondarily, working with those other systems to educate the homeless system. So criminal justice, foster care involvement, healthcare, the list goes on, but we want them to understand our system and vice versa. And finally, they're continuing to review the system performance measures and the program performance measures so we can continue to make improvements across the system. The Outreach Collaborative is continuing to increase connections with some of those alternative partners and finalizing policy and procedure standardization. Really, the goal is to get those policies and procedures completed this quarter and then bring back to the full Outreach Collaborative in January, which will eventually come to you all as really a best practice of how outreach should be operating. With the PHAs, we have launched the pilot for move-on strategies. We're still working with individual public housing authorities to be able to make changes to the administrative plans. We have 2 that have already had incorporated move-on strategies into their admin plans, but are looking for the other 6 to incorporate those changes and get that through. And then we're also having conversations about increasing voucher allocations for project-based vouchers with LIHTC properties, making sure that we have really a good source of what's next, specifically in increasing LIHTC property usage and making sure that folks have a place to go when they are having a hard time finding landlords that will accept those vouchers. And lastly, this launched today, if you did not see it, from the coalition. Dwell request for proposal to determine the administrative owner of the warehouse is out. It is due November 17th. So if you are interested in applying or know somebody that is applying, it is up on our procurement page and was also sent out today through the Arizona Housing Coalition. Moving on to monitoring, evaluation, and technical assistance, we developed a program performance metric dashboard, including demographic information. That was the one I referenced earlier. It really looks across the system. We're looking to see if we can further develop that into individual programs, but across the system really shows kind of all of the different metrics that we are measuring in those performance measures that were approved in July. We've continued to provide technical assistance to both COC funded agencies and then NOFO technical assistance throughout the NOFO process to both new and renewing agencies. That resulted in 8 new applicants this year, which was really exciting. And then the learning management system, it would not be a board meeting if I did not talk about the COC Learning Gateway. If you're not in it, please get in it. We have over 51 trainings in there live with more coming daily. Upcoming, we're going to continue to review the program performance measures, both at the committee level, but also making sure that those are up to date for our yearly program performance measures. Those will come to you next month. Continued content creation for the COC Learning Gateway. We will begin monitoring of priority agencies. Those agencies got notified last week about monitoring, and then we will be doing monitoring of regular monitoring starting in January. And then finally, changes to the NOFO scorecard for 2024. There were some significant things identified throughout the NOFO this year, and so we're looking at revamping the scorecard, and those community conversations will start in December, as well as changes to the portal that we use this year. Lastly, communication, coordination, and strategy. You all had a communications plan come to you in September, I believe, which included monthly communications talking points, communication listserv, and at the launch of COC social media. If you're not following us, go follow us. We have both a X and a LinkedIn. We launched the jurisdiction data dashboard, and then the shelter bill of rights came to you. Obviously, we'll be taking that back for some additional work before bringing it back to you. And so moving into this next quarter, we're going to continue to move forward the actions of the race equity plan, really leaning into the workforce work, as well as reviewing data and moving that forward. But this slide is mostly empty because we have accomplished a lot of the stuff in this step of the action plan. So we really will be using strategic planning to identify what else should the COC be working on moving forward. Want to talk briefly on some additional COC activities that are happening. The quarterly trends report will be coming to you next month. That happens every quarter, but don't want you all to lose sight of it. Data requests and access to data. This has dramatically increased over the last quarter. More and more folks are interested in the access to HMIS data. And so continuing to field those data requests, having conversations with people about what they're using the data for and how they can best partner with the COC and the work that we are doing. The HMIS and data landscape evaluation is just wrapping up. That will be coming to you at your next meeting in November as a presentation from ICF, but really a lot of good work came out of that, and we're excited to see what you all would like to do next. And finally, heat relief coordination, as the heat relief season is coming to an end. We know that it is vitally important and also very much impacts the work of all of you and people experiencing homelessness. So with that, I'll turn it back over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Katie. With that presentation, I'll open the floor up for any comments, feedbacks from the board or public. Move on to the next agenda item. Next up, we're going to talk about future agenda items. Do board members have any other action or discussion items for future meetings? Okay, take that as a no. Board roundtable.
Wait.
Oh.
Sorry. I think it would be awesome to, given what we just heard from the coordinated entry presentations, that we could take the suggestion to have the in-person coordinated entry subcommittee reports at the board meetings monthly. Can you hear me?
Yes, Cricket, we can hear you. And I've been working with the chairs to identify cadence for updates from different committees. And so we are gonna find a happy medium between presenting and working with staff to identify when, so that you don't hear the same updates every single month. But as things change, that it escalates up to the board with the hope that people are presenting at least on a quarterly basis minimum.
And then I think we're going to work on the format on what's presented. Thank you, Cricket. All right. Anything else on future agenda items? No? Okay.
Okay, I'm sorry. I can't work my computer. I should be there, but I was afraid of the traffic. Can we also put talking about feedback from the unsheltered NOFO and the youth development demo project at some point? Please.
Yes, we can provide feedback on the unsheltered NOFO. We have yet to receive feedback from the YHDP. So if we do receive it, it will come to you all.
Perfect, thank you.
All right. I'm going to open the floor for a roundtable of announcements, events, challenges that you would like to address, or any upcoming opportunities to come together for new ideas. Do any of the board members have any ideas, thoughts, or anything that they would like to share in general?
Just one. Go Diamondbacks.
Yes. Thank you, Mike. All right.
I guess I just had two quick things. One was just more just an acknowledgement of looking at the system flow dashboard and that it's the highest numbers I think we've ever seen on record with our active numbers. And I don't know, just wanting to acknowledge that. And also, like, if there's, maybe this goes to the last question, but if there's any opportunity for us to brainstorm or understand why the churn is so high in our inflow, active and outflow, and if there's anything that we can do to better understand that. And what I'm referencing to, right, is on our inflow, so many people, it's 1,200-ish, are coming from inactive, of not knowing. And then on our outflow, the vast majority are people who are leaving to unknown or negative destinations. And that meaning, like, they're moving off of our list. And so for us to better, like, understand or to talk through that, whether that's with y'all, with HMIS, or somebody, of like, how do we really understand this? And is this something that's just a matter of data definitions, or is it something that we can actually target in outside of our normal stuff to better understand?
I think we will see some changes with our change to 90-day activity, which will take place for October 1.
Okay.
Or took place for October 1. That's why you saw an increase in the by name list. So moving from that 30 days to 90 days for outreach activities, that will take place for the October 1 system flow dashboard as well. So we anticipate seeing a reduction in return from inactive and exit to unknown. It will not be all of them, but we do expect to see quite a reduction. And then I think we can have a more thorough discussion after that on what is happening.
Thank you, Katie.
Actually, could I just announce one thing? I do want to compliment the city of Mesa. In the last month, they approved on a 7-0 vote the funding for an additional 30 units that will be built behind the East Valley Men's Center. And I think that was pretty amazing that they were able to do that. And I think that the city of Mesa officials, staff really worked very hard in making that happen. So we're really glad to announce that.
Good announcement. Thank you, Mike.
And really quick, this is Tish from the Human Services Campus. We have a Project Connect next Tuesday in Arcadia, and we need volunteers. So if anyone's interested, you can please give me an email, send me an email, and I can connect you up with our team. Need volunteers.
Thank you, Tish. All right, if there's nothing else and no further business, the meeting is now adjourned.